Before we begin, a necessary statement. This video is a critical financial analysis of the Canadian grocery retail sector. It relies on public corporate earnings reports, historical legal rulings, and federal economic data. It is not an attack on the employees who stock the shelves, nor is it a personal attack on any single executive. It is an examination of a consolidated system. We follow the numbers, the profit margins, and the law. Viewer discretion is advised. Imagine you are standing in the center aisle of a massive, brightly lit supermarket. To your left, there are 50 different types of cereal packaged in vibrant, welcoming colors. To your right, 20 different brands of coffee promising comfort and energy. The shelves stretch endlessly into the distance, a towering monument to modern agricultural abundance and logistical perfection. It looks like the ultimate triumph of free market capitalism. It looks like you have absolute freedom, endless choices, and ultimate control over how you feed your family. But it is an illusion. A very expensive, carefully constructed, and legally protected illusion. When you push your cart to the checkout line, that illusion shatters. The bright lights suddenly feel clinical. The anxiety sets in. You watch the scanner beep, registering item after item, and you look at the final total on the digital screen. You feel a cold, sinking knot in your stomach. 2 standard grocery bags, $150. You trace your steps backward in your mind. You didn't buy luxury items. There are no prime cuts of steak in those bags. There are no imported cheeses. You bought bread, milk, some ground beef, eggs, and a few bruised vegetables. You bought the bare, biological essentials required to keep a human body functioning for another week. And yet, as you tap your debit card, you feel like you have been robbed in broad daylight. This is the grim reality for millions of Canadians in 2026. Going to the grocery store is no longer a mundane weekend chore. It is an exercise in financial survival. It is a weekly stress test on the breaking point of the middle class. For years, we have been told that this pain is an unavoidable tragedy of the modern world. The politicians and the billionaire CEOs appear on our television screens wearing somber expressions and plain suits. They point the finger at massive, invisible global forces. They blame broken supply chains. They blame the geopolitical conflict in Eastern Europe driving up wheat and fertilizer costs. They blame the federal carbon tax. They blame a generalized, unavoidable global inflation. They look directly into the camera and they tell us, we are all in this together. Times are incredibly tough and we are doing everything we can to shield you from the cost. But they are lying. We are not in this together. Welcome to the Northern Ledger. Today, we are opening the books on the greatest, most sustained wealth transfer in modern Canadian history. One that happens every single day, right in your neighborhood, every time a barcode is scanned. We are going to look past the televised excuses. We are going to open the audited financial statements. And we are going to expose the dark, inescapable architecture of the Canadian grocery cartel. To understand why a carton of eggs now feels like a luxury asset, we have to understand the battlefield you are stepping onto. In a healthy, functioning capitalist economy, competition is the great equalizer. If a store decides to charge an outrageous price for a loaf of bread, you simply walk across the street to a competitor who charges less. The greedy store loses your business, the fair store makes a profit, and prices naturally stabilize. That is the fundamental law of supply and demand. But what happens when there is no street to cross? What happens when the store across the street, the store down the block, and the store on the other side of town are all secretly owned by the exact same people? Canada's grocery sector is not a free market. It is, effectively, an oligopoly, a market completely dominated by a tiny handful of massive corporate leviathans. At the very top of the pyramid are the big 3 traditional domestic grocers. First, Loblaws, controlled by the billionaire Weston family, a dynasty of unimaginable wealth. Second, Empire Company, the corporate shield that owns Sobeys. And third, Metro, the dominant force controlling Quebec and Ontario. Add in the 2 foreign giants operating within our borders, Walmart and Costco. According to reports from the Competition Bureau of Canada, these 5 corporations now control roughly 80% of all grocery sales in the entire country. 80%. Let that number sink in. 5 corporate boardrooms, a handful of executives sitting around mahogany tables, control the caloric intake of 40 million people. But a monopoly is ugly. A monopoly invites regulation. So, the cartel maintains the illusion of choice to keep the public docile. You might think you are outsmarting the system by shopping at a discount store. You get angry at Loblaws because their prices are outrageous, so you decide to boycott them. You drive out of your way to No Frills, or Real Canadian Superstore, or Value Mart, or Fortino's, or T&T Supermarket. It doesn't matter. You are still giving your money to the Weston family. Loblaws owns them all. You get angry at Sobeys, so you proudly take your business to Freshco, or Safeway, or Foodland. Empire Company owns them all. You try to avoid Metro, so you shop at Food Basics. Metro owns it. Over the last 3 decades, these corporations have executed a ruthless, systematic campaign of consolidation. They didn't just compete with smaller, independent regional grocers, they bought them outright, or they priced them into bankruptcy. And the federal government, specifically the regulators tasked with preventing monopolies, stood by and watched as the market was swallowed whole, rubber-stamping merger after merger. They allowed the creation of corporate entities that are now too big to fail and, more dangerously, too big to care. When 5 players control the entire board, they do not have to compete on price. They only have to watch each other. It is a game of silent synchronization. If one raises the price of butter by $1, the others don't lower their price to steal customer. They simply raise their price by $1 as well. It is highly profitable. And technically, it is entirely legal. Usually. But to truly understand the psychology of this cartel, we cannot just look at how they operate today in the sunlight. We have to look at their history. We have to look at what they do when they think no one is watching, when the doors are closed and the lawyers are absent. This brings us to one of the darkest, most cynical chapters in Canadian corporate history: the bread price-fixing scandal. For over a decade, from 2001 to 2015, the price of commercial packaged bread in Canada rose steadily and relentlessly. Families budgeted for it. Single mothers working double shifts packed sandwiches for their children, grumbling about the rising cost of living and inflation. But it wasn't inflation. It was a criminal conspiracy. In 2017, the truth finally broke open. Executives from Loblaws and their sister company, George Weston Limited, formally admitted to participating in an industry-wide price-fixing arrangement. For 14 years, the largest grocery chains and commercial bakeries in the country had secretly colluded to artificially inflate the price of bread. Think about the sheer cruelty of that act. They did not collude to fix the price of caviar. They colluded to fix the price of bread. They literally stole pennies from the pockets of the poorest, most vulnerable Canadians every single day for over a decade. To avoid criminal prosecution and massive fines, Loblaws cooperated with the Competition Bureau, threw their co-conspirators under the bus, and offered the Canadian public $25 gift cards. $25. For 14 years of systemic, calculated theft on the most basic human staple in existence. It was a masterclass in corporate arrogance. The Northern Ledger brings this up not to dwell on a past legal settlement, but to establish a crucial, undeniable pattern of behavior. This is the psychological baseline of the Canadian grocery cartel. If these corporations were willing to sit in shadowy boardrooms and illegally conspire to gouge you on a loaf of bread, what makes you think they will not do the exact same thing with meat, with dairy, with baby formula? The bread scandal was not a glitch in the system. It was the system working exactly as designed. They got caught doing it illegally, so they evolved. They simply learned how to do it legally. They realized they didn't need to hold secret meetings in smoke-filled rooms to fix prices. When you own 80% of the market, the monopoly itself is the price-fixing mechanism. All they needed was a plausible excuse, and in 2022, the global economy handed them the greatest excuse in modern history. The year 2022 provided the grocery cartel with the perfect alibi. As the world violently emerged from a multi-year pandemic, the global economy fractured. Supply chains snapped. Inflation spiked across the developed world. Suddenly, the cost of manufacturing, the cost of shipping, and the price of raw materials began to climb. Panic set in, and the grocery giants, sitting comfortably at the top of a highly consolidated market, looked at the chaos and saw an opportunity that they simply could not resist. For the next 4 years, the public relations strategy they deployed was perfectly coordinated. The executives, their highly paid spokespeople, and their industry lobbyists went on every major news network in the country. They sat across from journalists, looking deeply concerned. They wore plain, unpretentious suits, and they recited the exact same script almost word for word. They told the Canadian public that the skyrocketing price of groceries was completely out of their control. They pointed to the broken global supply chains. They pointed to the geopolitical conflict in Eastern Europe driving up global wheat and fertilizer costs. They pointed to extreme weather events wiping out lettuce crops in California. And, most loudly of all, they pointed to the federal carbon tax, claiming it was making transportation impossibly expensive. They painted themselves not as the architects of the crisis, but as victims of circumstance, suffering right alongside the rest of us. They claimed, with a straight face, that they were doing everything in their immense power to absorb the economic shock, and that they were only passing along the bare minimum of these new costs to the consumer. It was a brilliant, highly effective smokescreen. It sounded entirely plausible to a frightened public. But there is a fatal flaw in their story, and to find it, you don't need an advanced degree in economics. You just need to look at their audited public financial statement. You just have to follow the money. Let's perform a basic financial autopsy on the cartel's defense. If a grocery store truly operates on razor-thin margins, as they constantly and loudly claim, and their operational costs suddenly go up, what should happen? If it costs them more to buy a carton of milk from the dairy farmer and more to truck that milk to the store, and they are truly just passing along that exact cost to you, their overall net profit margin should remain completely flat. Or, in a truly competitive, compassionate market where they absorb some of the pain for their customers, their profit margin should actually go down. But that is not what happened in Canada. Not even close. As Canadians watched their grocery bills double, as families began cutting meat from their diets, the cartel did not suffer. They thrive. We don't have to guess. We just look at their public filings. In 2023 alone, Loblaws reported net earnings of over $2 billion, a massive, staggering increase from their pre-pandemic baseline. Empire and Metro saw similar, historic, record-breaking windfalls. Their profit margins didn't just survive the global inflation crisis, their margins actively expanded. Economists have a term for this phenomenon. It is called excuseflation, or more bluntly, greedflation. Here is the psychological weapon they used against you. When inflation dominates the nightly news cycle for months on end, consumers expect prices to rise. We are psychologically primed to accept it as an inevitable reality. The cartel understands this behavioral economics perfectly. So, when their supplier raises the wholesale price of ground beef by 10%, the grocery store doesn't raise the retail price by 10%. They raise it by 15% or 20%. They use the very real, terrifying crisis of global inflation as a human shield to quietly pad their own pockets. They hide their aggressive margin expansion inside the noise and chaos of a volatile market. Take the federal carbon tax, for example. The executives and the politicians who support them love to blame the carbon tax for food inflation. And yes, taxing fuel does increase the cost of transporting food across a massive frozen country like Canada. It is a mathematical reality. But let's look at the actual, undeniable math. According to calculations provided by the Governor of the Bank of Canada, The carbon tax accounts for just 0.15 percentage points of grocery inflation. 0.15. It is a fraction of a fraction. It is practically a rounding error on your receipt. Yet, the grocers use it as their primary, loudest scapegoat. They furiously point at the politicians in Ottawa so that you will not look closely at their own balance sheet. So, a logical question remains: where did all those billions in record post-pandemic profits go? Did these massive corporations use this historic windfall to lower prices for struggling families? Did they use it to fundamentally increase the standard of living and the base wages of the frontline workers who actually stock the shelves, operate the forklifts, and scan the barcodes? Absolutely not. In fact, the cruelty of their labor practices is a matter of public record. In June 2020, executives from Loblaws, Empire, and Metro were actually called before a parliamentary committee after they simultaneously canceled the $2 an hour pandemic hero pay for their frontline workers. They stripped away the hazard pay from their lowest paid, most vulnerable employees on the exact same day. The money they squeezed from the public went exactly where it always goes in an unchecked oligopoly. It went upward. It went to record dividend payouts to reward their wealthiest shareholders. And, most importantly, it went into massive, aggressive stock buyback programs. A stock buyback is a financial maneuver where a company uses its excess cash to buy its own shares off the open market and effectively destroy them. This artificially reduces the number of shares available, which instantly and artificially inflates the value of the remaining shares. Who owns the vast majority of those remaining shares? The billionaire Weston family. The holding companies, the executive suite. They took the extra dollars they ruthlessly squeezed out of your weekly grocery budget and they used them to artificially pump their own stock prices. This maneuver predictably triggers multi-million-dollar performance bonuses for the very CEOs who went on television claiming their hands were tied by global forces. It is a closed, parasitic loop of wealth extraction. Think about the sheer, dark irony of this system. Across the country, single mothers are skipping meals so their children can eat before school. Seniors on fixed pensions are waiting until the evening to buy heavily discounted, expiring meat and dented cans. University students are surviving on rice and food bank donations. And the extra $5 they were deliberately overcharged at the checkout aisle was systematically siphoned out of their struggling community, funneled directly into a corporate treasury in Toronto, and used to buy back stock, further enriching a billionaire family that already owns castles in Europe. It is not just a market failure. It is a profound structural moral failure, but extracting wealth through the checkout lane wasn't enough to satisfy the cartel. They realized that to truly dominate the Canadian landscape and secure their profits for the next century, they needed to own the physical land itself. Which brings us to their darkest, most well-hidden financial secret. The inescapable trap you don't even know you are walking into. We have established the motive. We have established the mechanism of excuseflation. But the true genius of the Canadian grocery cartel does not just lie in raising prices, it lies in its architecture. It is an architecture designed specifically to make you feel like you are fighting back, when in reality, you are just feeding the beast from a different angle. In the spring of 2024, as public anger reached a boiling point over the grotesque price of a single chicken breast, a massive grassroots movement erupted across Canada. Hundreds of thousands of people mobilized online and pledged to boycott the biggest, most visible name in the game, Loblaws. The strategy seemed sound. It felt empowering. Hit them where it hurts. Hurt their quarterly retail revenue. Force them to lower prices to win back the consumer. But the boycott, while a powerful and justified statement of public frustration, exposed a terrifying reality about the modern Canadian economy. You cannot easily boycott a monopoly that has vertically integrated itself into the very fabric of the nation. When you decide, out of principle, to stop shopping at Loblaws, you think you are punishing the Weston family. You want to save money, so you drive to a discount grocer. You go to No Frills. You go to Real Canadian Superstore. You go to Value Mart. You go to Fortino's. Or you go to T&T Supermarket for international goods. But the Weston family owns them all. They have captured every single segment of the consumer market, from the high-end organic shopper to the low-income bargain hunter. Even if you manage to avoid their retail brick-and-mortar stores entirely, you are still likely buying their products. They own massive nationwide distribution network. They own the no-name discount brand. They own the premium President's Choice label. They own the pharmacies where you buy your life-saving medication, like Shoppers Drug Mart. They even own the bank that issues your credit card and holds your loyalty points, PC Financial. This is what economists call vertical integration. They control the farm, the delivery truck, the warehouse, the shelf, the private label brand, and the point-of-sale terminal. They have built an inescapable, closed-loop economic ecosystem, but the darkest, most brilliant, and least understood part of this ecosystem has absolutely nothing to do with food. It has to do with real estate. The grocery giants have discovered a financial loophole that allows them to hide their true profitability in plain sight. It is a sophisticated shell game played with property deeds and rent checks, designed to confuse the public and the politicians. Let's look at exactly how it works. Many of these massive corporations do not just operate grocery stores, they operate real estate investment trusts, or REITs. These are completely separate financial entities designed explicitly to own, manage, and extract income from commercial real estate. For example, George Weston Limited, the ultimate parent company of Loblaws, spun out Choice Properties REIT, a real estate empire now worth billions of dollars. They own the prime commercial land in almost every major city and suburb in the country. So, who are the primary anchor tenants of Choice Properties REIT? Loblaws, Shoppers Drug Mart, Real Canadian Superstore. According to their own public financial disclosures, Loblaws pays hundreds of millions of dollars in rent directly into that trust every single year. The Weston family, through one corporate entity, owns the physical building and the land it sits on. Through another corporate entity, they operate the grocery store inside that exact same building. The grocery store simply pays rent to the real estate company. This is where the financial magic happens. If the grocery store is making too much profit and the Canadian public is getting dangerously angry about the cost of food, the executives can simply increase the rent they charge themselves. The grocery store's profit margin magically shrinks on paper. The CEOs can go on national television, open their books, and honestly say, "Look at our expenses. Our operational costs have gone up. Our commercial rent is incredibly high. Our grocery margins are razor thin. We are barely surviving." But the money hasn't disappeared. It has simply been moved from their left pocket to their right pocket. The rent money flows safely out of the heavily scrutinized grocery subsidiary and directly into the highly profitable, untaxed real estate trust. That trust then distributes massive, quiet dividends back to the same parent company, back to the same billionaire shareholders. It is an immaculate, perfectly legal mechanism for wealth extraction. You, the consumer, are not just paying for a loaf of bread, or a jug of milk, or a bag of apples. Baked into the retail price of every single item you scan at the checkout is the cost of that artificially inflated corporate rent. You are paying the landlord, and the landlord is the grocery cartel itself. They have turned the basic biological human necessity of eating into a highly sophisticated mechanism for real estate speculation and dividend generation. They have financialized your hunger. When you finally understand this structure, the entire system looks completely different. The confusing gamified loyalty programs aren't designed to save you money. They are designed to harvest your behavioral data, track your spending habits, and lock you permanently into their ecosystem. The empty shelves during minor supply chain hiccups aren't just logistical errors, they are leverage to justify the next price hike. The cartel doesn't view you as a customer to be served. They view you as an extraction point, a captive audience trapped in a closed loop with nowhere else to go. And this relentless systematic extraction has a profound, measurable human cost. The cold numbers on a corporate balance sheet eventually translate into real human suffering on the streets of Canada. Because when a cartel squeezes a population for every last drop of profit, the social safety nets begin to violently snap, which brings us to the final, devastating chapter of this crisis. The reality on the ground. The normalization of hunger in a G7 nation. We have examined the history of corporate price fixing. We have audited the sophisticated excuse of inflation. We have mapped the inescapable vertical integration trap. But to truly understand the Canadian grocery cartel, we cannot just look at the spreadsheets, the stock charts, or the real estate portfolios. We have to look away from the balance sheets and look directly at the streets. We have to measure the true human cost of this system. In a functioning, prosperous, developed society, a full-time job is supposed to guarantee a basic level of dignity. It guarantees that you can afford a roof over your head, warmth in the winter, and most fundamentally, food on your table. That is the basic, unwritten social contract of the Western world. In Canada, by the year 2026, that social contract has been completely shredded. We are witnessing something that should be impossible in a resource-rich G7 nation. We are witnessing the normalization of mass hunger. Food banks. Canada released a report that should have stopped the entire country in its tracks. It should have been front-page news every single day until the crisis was resolved. According to their latest comprehensive hunger count report, there were over 2 million visits to food banks in a single month. A devastating, unprecedented 90% increase compared to 2019. Millions of visits in just 30 days. But the most chilling, heartbreaking part of the data was not the total number of visits. It was who was standing in those lines. These are no longer just the chronically unhoused, or the deeply marginalized, or those suffering from severe addiction. The lines stretching around the block outside the community food banks are filled with people wearing heavy work boots and carrying lunchboxes. They are filled with registered nurses, public school teachers, construction workers, and exhausted international students. They are filled with people who work 40 hours a week, pay their income taxes, play by the rules, and simply cannot make the grocery math work anymore. When a full-time skilled worker has to stand in the freezing rain for 2 hours just to get a donated box of generic pasta and a dented can of beans, the economy has not just slowed down. It has failed. But the cartel, sitting comfortably in their high-altitude boardrooms, has a completely different perspective. To them, the massive lines at the food bank are not a sign of catastrophic systemic failure. They are a brilliant, hidden, massive corporate subsidy. Think about the twisted, cynical logic of this system. The cartel maximizes their shareholder profits by aggressively squeezing the consumer at the checkout counter and simultaneously suppressing the base wages of their own frontline retail employees. Because groceries are artificially expensive and wages are artificially low, millions of Canadians literally cannot afford the calories required to survive. So, who steps in to feed them? Charity, exhausted community volunteers, and the everyday taxpayers who fund these local organizations. The community food bank effectively subsidizes the cartel's ruthless business model. If society, out of sheer compassion, did not step in to feed the hungry, there would be riots in the grocery aisles. People would simply walk out with the food they need. The food bank acts as a critical pressure release valve, allowing the massive grocers to continue their aggressive pricing strategies without facing genuine, violent social unrest. And the cartel has the absolute audacity to turn this national tragedy into a public relations victory. During the holidays, you will see massive, brightly colored bins placed at the front entrances of Loblaws, Sobeys, or Metro, asking you, the already squeezed, struggling customer, to buy extra food and donate it to the hungry. The multi-billion-dollar corporation, pulling in historic net profits, asks you to pay full retail price for a can of soup, leave it in their store so they can donate it to the community and claim the positive public relations and often the charitable tax deduction. They profit off the initial retail sale, they get the tax break, they get the glowing news segment, and you pay the bill. It is a masterpiece of cynical corporate engineering. And the damage goes far beyond the immediate pain of missing a meal. There is a secondary, long-term cost that the cartel will never, ever pay for, but society will bear for generations. A collapsing public health system. When fresh produce, lean proteins, and high-quality dairy become luxury items reserved for the upper middle class, what do struggling, exhausted families buy? They buy heavily processed, calorie-dense, nutrient-poor garbage. They buy the cheapest frozen pizza. They buy sodium-packed instant noodle. They buy refined sugar. We are actively, systematically force-feeding the lower and middle classes a diet that guarantees chronic, lifelong illness. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, severe malnutrition, these are not just personal failures. These are the direct biological consequences of a monopolized, profit-driven food supply. And when these millions of people inevitably get sick, who pays for their complex, expensive medical care? The public healthcare system. The exact same public system that is already cracking under the immense weight of the population trap we discussed in our last investigation. The cartel privatizes the immense profits of high food prices, and they socialize the massive medical costs of malnutrition onto the Canadian taxpayer. So, where does this end? What is the end game for the Canadian consumer? If we do not intervene, if we simply accept this as the new normal, the trajectory is clear. We are rapidly cementing a neo-feudal society. A tiny, powerful class of land-owning, dividend-collecting elites presiding over a massive, struggling population of exhausted, indebted renters. A population who spends half their monthly paycheck just to consume the basic calories needed to wake up and keep working the next day. A nation where buying a fresh steak is a major financial milestone. But there is a solution. A hard reset. First, we must finally acknowledge that asking a massive monopoly to politely regulate itself is a fool's errand. We need aggressive, unforgiving antitrust enforcement. We need to break the mud. The Competition Bureau must be given sharp teeth, not just the power to write angry, strongly worded reports. If a single corporation controls too much of the market and abuses that power, they must be legally forced to divest their assets. Second, we need to shatter the protectionist border wall that shields the cartel from real, aggressive competition. Why are massive European discount grocers like Aldi and Lidl operating successfully in the United States, driving down prices for American consumers, but entirely absent from the Canadian market? Because the regulatory environment is designed to keep them out. We need to actively invite foreign competition to break the oligopoly's iron grip. And third, we need a massive windfall tax. If a corporation leverages a global crisis to artificially inflate their profit margins far beyond historical norms, that excess, unearned profit must be taxed heavily and immediately returned to the public purse to fund the very social safety nets they are deliberately straining. The time for polite consumer requests, ineffectual boycotts, and public relations apologies is over. We cannot have a prosperous, thriving country if the fundamental, necessary act of feeding a family requires going into credit card debt. We cannot pretend to be a functioning democracy when 5 corporate boardrooms hold the entire population's food supply hostage. The cartel relies completely on our fatigue. They rely on our compliance. They assume we will eventually just give up, stop complaining, and accept $20 chicken breasts as the new, grim normal of Canadian life. It is time to prove them wrong. This has been The Northern Ledger. Thank you for watching.